There is a simple truth, yet it is obscured by countless layers of concepts. Enlightenment is not something you must attain. It is something you already are. Ramana Maharshi, the silent sage of Mount Aranakula, never urged people to seek some special state. He did not speak of a future paradise, nor did he construct a complex philosophical system to satisfy the intellect. His entire teaching, if it could be condensed into a single point, is return to yourself. But the paradox lies here. People search for enlightenment everywhere, in scriptures, in meditation, in ecstatic experiences, while what they seek has never left them for even a moment. Enlightenment, according to Ramana Maharshi, is not about becoming something higher. It is the cessation of the delusion that you have never been it. So how do you know that you are very close to enlightenment? Are there any clear, practical, unmystical, and unpretentious signs? Perhaps you will understand what Ramana Maharshi once said. Enlightenment is not something new. It is merely the elimination of what is not real. Understanding enlightenment through the lens of Ramana Maharshi. Before discussing the signs, it's necessary to clarify a fundamental point. If you misunderstand enlightenment, you will look for the wrong signs. 1. Enlightenment is not an experience. In the modern spiritual world, enlightenment is often equated with ecstatic states, joy, ecstasy, a feeling of oneness, inner light. But Ramana Maharshi is very clear. All experiences come and go. What comes and goes is not you. Enlightenment is not an experience because an experience requires an experiencer. Enlightenment, on the other hand, is the dissolution of the experiencer himself. 2. The ego, the root of all searching. According to Ramana Maharshi, the ego is not a real entity. It is a concept that arises when consciousness identifies with body and mind. The core question is not how to attain enlightenment, but who is seeking enlightenment? When you trace this question back to its root, not through thought, but through pure mindfulness, the so-called I begins to dissolve. 3. Who am I? Not to be answered. Many people turn the question, who am I, into an intellectual exercise. But Ramana Maharshi never asked you to find the answer in words. That question is like an arrow returning to its source. When the mind returns to itself, it finds no separate entity, and in that non-discovery, the truth is revealed. First sign, you no longer feel the center of everything. One of the biggest misconceptions about enlightenment is that the enlightened person becomes greater, more important, more exalted. In reality, according to Ramana Maharshi, the opposite happens. You become smaller, to the point of almost disappearing. 1. The natural dissolution of the self. When still identified with the ego, everything in life revolves around an invisible axis. Me. Whatever anyone says concerns me. Good or bad things happen, affect me. Praise, I get excited. Criticism, I withdraw or react. But as you begin to get very close to enlightenment, a subtle change occurs. You are still there, but you are no longer at the center of the universe. This doesn't come from an effort at humility, nor from trying to be better. It happens naturally as the identification with body and mind begins to loosen. Ramana Maharshi once said, when the ego disappears, there is no one to be proud of or inferior to. And that is precisely this state. 2. No longer needing to prove, defend, or compete. A very clear sign, but often overlooked, is you no longer feel the urge to prove yourself right. Before, you might argue to win, to gain recognition, to protect your self-image. Now, you can listen to a completely different perspective without any internal tension, not because you are weaker, because there is no one left who needs protection. You realize that right and wrong are the movements of the mind. Truth doesn't need to take sides. Ramana Maharshi never engaged in philosophical debate. When asked very profound questions, he sometimes remained silent, not because he didn't know, but because no ego wanted to win the dialogue. 3. You begin to live lightly amidst praise and criticism, gain and loss. When you are no longer the center, praise or criticism no longer pierces your heart like an arrow. This doesn't mean you become numb. On the contrary, you still feel, but you are no longer attached. Praise comes, you smile. Criticism comes, you smile. Both pass like clouds across the sky. This lightness doesn't come from an attitude of not caring about life, but from a profound realization. These things don't define me, for you no longer position yourself as the main character of the story. A very profound, yet incredibly liberating change occurs when you begin to see life through a lens that no longer constantly personalizes it. You no longer ask, "Why did this happen to me? Why did that person treat me like that?" Instead, there is a broader perspective. Life is happening, and I am a part of it. Nothing more, nothing less. Ramana Maharshi calls this the disintegration of the doer. Actions still happen, words are still spoken, but there is no longer the feeling of, "I am the doer." Second sign, inner silence becomes a familiar home, ***. If one word were chosen to describe Ramana Maharshi, it would be silence. But the silence he speaks of is not the muteness of the mouth, but the stillness of the source of consciousness. 1. Silence is not emptiness, it is fullness. As you approach enlightenment, you begin to realize something very strange. Within you there is always a foundation of silence, never disturbed. Thoughts come and go. Emotions arise and cease. Circumstances change constantly, but the knowledge of all these things remains. Ramana Maharshi calls this self. This silence does not need to be created, does not need to be maintained. It doesn't disappear when you're busy. It's always there. It's just that before you were too preoccupied with the noise of your mind. 2. The mind is still active, but you're no longer swept away. A common misconception is, enlightenment means no more thinking. Ramana Maharshi never taught that. The difference lies in this. Before, you were the stream of thoughts. Now, you are aware of the stream of thoughts. Like, before, you were engrossed in a movie. Now, you are watching the movie. Thoughts are still running, but you are no longer chasing them. And in that space, silence emerges. Free. This silence becomes your return. As you approach enlightenment, you begin to return to silence naturally, without ritual, without special meditation postures. In the midst of conversation, there is silence. Amidst work, there is silence. Amidst chaos, there is silence. It's not that you're avoiding the world. It's that you're no longer losing yourself in the world. Ramana Maharshi once said, "Silence is the highest teaching, because in silence, there are no concepts. There is no teacher, no student, only pure presence. For you begin to trust silence more than words." A very profound sign is, you no longer feel the need to explain everything. You understand that truth cannot be fully encapsulated in words. The essence can only be realized in silence. Therefore, you speak less, but your words carry more weight. You are silent more, but not because of distance, but because you are at home. Third sign, you react less, but you aware deeper ***. One of the most obvious, but also most misunderstood, transformations on the path to enlightenment is, you no longer react as much as before. 1. Reaction is the instinct of the ego. Awareness is the nature of self. Reaction always comes from the ego. It is quick, impulsive, defensive. Someone says a sentence, the mind immediately constructs a story. A situation occurs, emotions erupt before there is space for awareness. Ramana Maharshi points out that reaction occurs when you believe yourself to be body-mind. When this identification loosens, reaction naturally slows down, not because you are suppressing it, but because there is no longer fuel. Instead, awareness emerges. 2. The sacred pause between stimulus and response. A very subtle sign of someone nearing enlightenment is a space appears between what happens and how you respond. This space is not created by you. It manifests itself when you are no longer carried away by the stream of thoughts. In that pause, you see the emotion arising, you see the thought forming, but you are no longer carried along. Ramana Maharshi calls this staying with the witness. Free. Emotions are still present, but no longer dominate. A common misconception is that enlightenment makes people emotionless. The truth is the opposite. You still feel sadness when you lose something, pain when you are hurt, joy when something beautiful happens. But these emotions no longer define who you are. They come, are seen clearly, and go. No more long-winded conversations like, "Why am I always treated like this? I don't deserve to be loved." Because you no longer mistake emotions for me. For deeper awareness opens up action-oriented wisdom. As reactions subside, natural wisdom emerges. You no longer say things you'll regret. You no longer act simply to vent your emotions. Instead, words become precise. Actions become appropriate. Silence becomes the smart choice. This isn't a learned skill. This is wisdom that emerges when the ego no longer interferes. 4th sign, fear disappears silently. 1. All fears stem from a false identification. Ramana Maharshi points out a simple truth. Fear exists only when you believe yourself to be the body. Fear of loss, fear of illness, fear of death, fear of rejection, abandonment, judgment, all are based on the assumption, I am this, and it can be harmed. When you begin to realize you are not the body, not the mind, the foundation of fear shakes. 2. Fear doesn't disappear suddenly, it fades. This transformation is often very subtle. There is no dramatic moment declaring, I am no longer afraid. Instead, you realize you're no longer as anxious as before. Things that once made you insecure no longer hold such great power. Fear may still visit, but it doesn't stay. Free. The fear of losing me gives way to profound trust. When the ego softens, you no longer feel like a solitary entity battling the world. A wordless belief emerges. Life knows how to operate on its own. You no longer need to control everything. You no longer panic in the face of uncertainty, not because you know the future, but because you have touched something unaffected by time. For death loses its psychological power. One of the most profound points in Ramana Maharshi's teachings is, the fear of death vanishes when you know you were never born. He said, death comes to the body, not to you. When this is no longer a philosophy, but a direct realization, humanity's greatest fear begins to dissolve. And when the fear of death dissolves, other smaller fears also lose their place. 5th sign, you no longer seek answers externally ****. Ramana Maharshi once said, truth is not found by searching. It reveals itself when the search stops. 1. The healthy fatigue of the seeker. Most who reach this stage have read many spiritual books, listened to many masters, practiced many methods, not because those things are wrong, but because you have gone far enough to see their limits. You begin to feel a very special kind of fatigue, not physical fatigue, but fatigue from accumulating concepts. A quiet intuition emerges. If truth could be found outside, I would have found it long ago. 2. The external teacher fades. The inner teacher is revealed. A clear sign of someone very close to enlightenment is, you still respect your teachers, but you are no longer dependent on them. Ramana Maharshi never claimed to be a guru. He only said, the true guru is within. When this sign appears, You no longer chase after new teachings. You no longer feel a lack if you don't learn something more, not because of pride, but because you have begun to hear the silent voice within. 3. The cessation of searching does not lead to stagnation. Many people fear that if they stop searching, they will stop. But the reality is quite the opposite. When searching ceases, attention becomes sharper, life becomes more vibrant, wisdom arises spontaneously, because energy is no longer dispersed. You no longer ask, which method is right? Who is the greatest teacher? You simply return to the core question, who am I? And then, even that question vanishes. 4. Intuition replaces belief. A very profound sign is, you no longer believe, you know. Not knowing with reason, but knowing with presence. You no longer need to reassure yourself with philosophy. You no longer need to cling to belief to fight fear, because you have touched upon something that needs no proof. 6th sign, love becomes unconditional and without effort. 1. Love is no longer an emotion, but a state of being. Previously, love came and went. There were people to love, people to hate. There were conditions, there were expectations. But as you approach enlightenment, love no longer depends on anyone or anything. Ramana Maharshi said, love is the essence of self. When the ego melts away, love is revealed. It doesn't need to be created. 2. There are no longer boundaries of self, other. Unconditional love is not about loving everyone emotionally. It is about the inner boundaries gradually dissolving. You no longer see others as completely separate entities. There is a profound empathy, not from morality, but from awareness. When others suffer, you feel, not out of obligation, but because there is no longer a feeling of detachment. 3. Compassion requires no effort. Before, you might have tried to be good, kind, tolerant. Now, kindness happens naturally, not because you want to be good, but because there is no one left to oppose others. Ramana Maharshi never preached morality. His presence itself is compassion. 4. Love without fear of loss. One of the most profound changes is, you no longer love out of fear. No fear of abandonment. No fear of unrequited love. No fear of loss. Because this love does not come from lack. It comes from abundance. Namaste.